I'd like to talk about a period that was a very important period of my RAF career, and that relates to the Tornado. The Tornado, the fighter version of the Tornado, initially, which was known as the Tornado, initially it was called the Tornado Air Defence Variant, Tornado ADV. Specifically, it was also known as the Tornado F2, which was replaced by the Tornado F3. They were basically very similar. But why was this important to me? My father was a fighter pilot in the Battle of Britain and through the war. I had set my sights on being a second generation fighter pilot, which I achieved after training. Went in and became a fighter pilot on the Lightning, and then I was a fighter pilot on the Phantom, and the Phantom was now being replaced by the Tornado fighter version. And by this stage I also knew, because I'd done a tour at the Lightning Operational Conversion Unit at Coltishall. I'd done a tour instructing on the Nat and Hunter advanced flying training at RAF Valley in Wales, or Anglesey, and I knew I was well equipped to be, and the timing was good as well, to be the first pilot to go and fly the Tornado F2. After I did my Phantom training, I went to the Ministry of Defence in London as a squadron leader for my first staff tour. All my staff tours mainly were in London. I enjoyed London. But I did 2 years there, and then I went to the RAF Staff College at Bracknell in those days to do a year there. And I knew, so I did Bracknell, and I well remember sort of the postings were coming up. I made it quite plain. In fact, I've been shouting for a few years that I wanted to have the job of introducing the Tornado ADV F2 into RAF service. It seemed like a natural progression to me, and it's what I wanted. But of course, there's plenty of competition there as well. Anyway, Staff College, cut a long story short, we came up to our postings towards the end of the year, and I was told I was going to get promoted, which was ideal, to Wing Commander, because it was a Wing Commander job that I was looking at. And two, and most importantly, I really got what I considered to be the plum posting of my course, which was to be the officer commanding of the Tornado F2/3 Operational Conversion Unit, and introduce the Tornado fighter version into RAF service. I had got what I wanted, exactly what I wanted. I also knew it was going to be a tremendous challenge. That was 1983, in fact, when I was at Staff College, and the aircraft was coming into service sometime during '84, but it got delayed a bit. So I went off after Staff College. I did a Hawk refresher course at RAF Brawley, and then went up to Coningsby to get myself back into the air defence world. I did a short Phantom course, and then I took command of the embryo Operational Conversion Unit, known as number 229 Operational Conversion Unit, which later also became 65 Squadron, to prepare for the Tornado coming into service. There had been, up until that point, there had been a course design team already doing excellent work to prepare the way for the courses and the training package that we were going to put forward. But now I was there, and whilst things did get delayed, but during the whole of 1984 until November, we stayed current flying the Phantom at Coningsby with the Phantom Operational Conversion Unit. That kept our hand in. And at the same time, we were going through the process of more prepared. There was plenty of preparatory work to do, both from the flying point of view, from the squadron point of view as a whole, and from the engineering point of view in particular. And we'd assembled, particularly on the engineering side, a group of sort of top experts who'd been working with the Tornado, the ground attack variant, the Tornado GR1, mainly from at RAF Cottesmore, the triple nation training establishment there, because the Tornado was a tri-national aircraft, and in the ground attack role, in the mud moving role, that was being all the training was being done at in the UK at Cottesmore. So they came together. Actually, it was quite funny talking about engineering. My senior engineering officer, who was posted into me, a chap called David Hobart, who was fantastic value. But when I went through the Hawk refresher course at Broady, he had been based there, in fact, at the time, and he found me in the bar one night, and he said, Rick, I hear you're going to command the Tornado F2 OCU. And I said, yes. He said, I want to be your senior engineering officer. So after a few beers, I quite liked him, I quite liked his style, and sort of, cut the long story short, that's how it all started. And he came on board, and he was very critical to what happened over the next few years. Then in November 1984, together with the Air Officer Commanding 11 Group, Air Vice Marshal Ken Hare, he and I went up to British Airspace at Warton in Lancashire, and we flew with the Director of Flight Operations and the Chief Test Pilot, the first two aircraft back to Coningsby. That was on the 5th of November 1984. And the aircraft were on the ground from that moment on, because we weren't qualified on the aircraft, and they were used very much for engineering training in those last couple of months of 1984. At the beginning of 1985, because I took the very first two crews to Warton, to British Airspace again, to convert to the aircraft with British Airspace. And we spent a few months there. Lovely base, good bunch of chaps, and it was very interesting and great fun, quite frankly. We did, I think it was 2 months, we did a month of ground school to start with. There was a lot of new to learn, because the Tornado was a very different aircraft. It was even, the Lightning, the Phantom was a quantum leap forward from the Lightning. The Tornado, in many ways, was a quantum leap forward from the Phantom as well, particularly on the computer side. So we had to learn. There's a lot of technical stuff we had to learn, and then we did. I think it was about 17 sorties of flying, and our instructors were the test pilots from British Airspace. We knew them anyway because they both happened to be ex-Lightning pilots, and the first two pilots on the course, myself and another chap called Chris Stevens, we were both ex-Lightning pilots as well, so we all knew each other. Anyway, so we did the course there, and my backseater was one of the chaps who'd been on the course design team, and another who was going to be a flight commander on the new unit, Squadron Leader Nobby Clark, first class chap, absolutely first class. And the other navigator on that first course was Squadron Leader Andy Lister Tomlinson, who was going to be the in charge of the weapons training. Both first class. In fact, to be quite frank, my whole team to bring the aircraft in was first class and specially selected. Indeed, it was more than specially selected. I had been invited before the previous year, to go down to meet with the RAF personnel staff to talk about who I wanted to be posted in to form the initial cadre for the Operation Conversion Unit. So I did sort of select who I wanted. So anyway, I did the first course, and then there was a second course with, again, excellent, a bunch of chaps on the second course as well. And I remember the third Tornado to be delivered to the RAF was the aircraft that I flew back from that course from Warton to Coningsby with Nobby Clark, who was my navigator on that course, my fighter gator, back to Coningsby. That was the third aircraft. So that set the scene. We now had 3 aircraft at Coningsby, and we went back there, I think it was the end of March, beginning of April 1985. And then, to set the scene, we're talking about 1985 now, and between then and December the 31st, 1986, and more aircraft were going to be delivered, obviously, during that period, and I was responsible in that time to make sure all the air crew were trained up, that the engineers were ready, that the aircraft were ready, serviceable, able to be used in many different ways. We had to validate the training package for the courses that were going to come through for the initial squadrons. In that time, by the 31st of December, because another decision was made, because there was a bit of a delay, so it was decided that my Operation Conversion Unit was also going to be the first squadron to be declared. And we're going to be declared to NATO on the 31st of December 1986. So in a period of under two years, we were going to have to build up, except over 20 aircraft. We were going to have to build up to a unit with probably 60 plus aircrew trained and ready, and also a unit with 300 or so engineers that had gone through the complete combat ready workup and was ready to be declared operational at the end of 1986. That included proving the weapon system as far as missile firings were concerned, in service this was, and also the gunnery system. Everything had to be proved. It was quite a challenging time. And there were other demands on us too, which I'll talk about in a little while. But suffice to say that we met that challenge. That challenge was met for, in my view, for two reasons. One, the aircraft itself was pretty serviceable. It was a nice, very nice to fly aircraft. The cockpit environment was the best I've encountered throughout my flying career. The aircraft itself was capability. It carried 8 missiles, like the Phantom did. It had an integral gun, which was a very good gun. It had an inertial navigation system. But it was very much fly-by-wire. It had a quadruple fly-by-wire system for flying controls with a mechanical backup. The aircraft was very highly computerized. It had a main computer, and throughout the aircraft, I think there were total of about 18 computers on the aircraft. So it was a much more advanced aircraft than the Phantom, and it really was. It was a delightful aircraft to fly. The radar, it had what should have been sort of a quantum leap forward, but initially wasn't, because we had an aircraft that radar was probably going to see out to the same range as what the Phantom had seen. The main difference was that we could track what we called track while scan up to 10 aircraft. So, and also we had TV tabs, what we call TV. There were TVs in the cockpits, and this was a huge advantage, in fact, because with all the computer systems we had, we could sort of build up a sort of a tactical picture of what was going on our TV screens. So from the situational awareness point of view, the aircraft really was excellent, and from the ability to navigate accurately or do anything accurately was superb. It also had a head-up display, and that was excellent, and an angle of attack indicator. It was a magnificent aircraft to fly. We did have problems. We had problems in the build-up on the radar, and that's why, unfortunately, the aircraft became known as the Blue Circle aircraft, because at one stage, because we were having problems with the radar, they had to, with the routes produced by GEC, as it was then, and they had to sort of take the aircraft, the radars out and send them back to the factory to be modified. And that meant that we did have a small number of aircraft at one stage that we had to put ballast into the nose, sort of concrete as people called it, hence the sort of title, sort of Blue Circle. So, and we did have problems, and I remember sort of, and my chaps would make me, I could see them from the flying. The problem was we were seeing multi-targets, and my chaps were keeping me well informed, and I was making sure that the staff up the line were being kept well informed and briefed as well. And it culminated, in fact, when I was summoned with my team down to the Commander-in-Chief of Headquarters Strike Command, who at the time was Air Chief Marshal Sir Peter Harding, who I knew well and admired greatly, and he used to fly with me quite a bit in the OCU. And I never forget going down there with my team, and basically I told him exactly as it was. No, didn't pull it. No strings attached, just told him straight. What I said was very much accepted, and I was delighted about that. And what happened out of that was we've got a fair bit of money injected into the system to modify the radar, but not before we'd done what they call trial Bunbury. We did a number of radar sorties specifically to have a look at certain aspects of the radar. All this had to be done in our build-up to getting operational. We did that. The radars were modified. By the time we became operational on the 31st of December 1986, we were on probably the third or fourth version of the modified radar. So we were moving forward, and we wouldn't have been declared if we weren't ready to be declared. We also, in the process of building ourselves up to operational declaration, I mentioned gun firing. We went to Cyprus for an armour practice camp down there, which, apart from getting the ideal opportunity to get the aircraft overseas, but to get the squadron together, build up the bonding and esprit de corps, and Cyprus, believe me, is an excellent place to do just that. The flying was good down there because the weather was good. We got excellent scores with the gun. In fact, the scores were so good that at the very first attempt at gun firing, because there was a competition in those days between the fighter squadrons within Fighter Command, as it was, and we won, and there was a trophy to be awarded, the Seed Trophy, and we won the Seed Trophy at the very first attempt. So that was really an excellent achievement, sort of, which said a lot of good things about the gun in the aircraft. On the weapon system side, I've already talked about the radar, how we had to, without going into detail, how we had to work that one up and improve it. But we also had to improve the missile firing, and the missile firing was mainly sort of worked in conjunction with the radar. The heat-seeking missiles were not too difficult to show that they were working okay. In fact, as it turned out, the radar-guided missile was a missile called the Skyflash, and I did the first Skyflash firing at the missile practice camp that we ran in a range off Wales, Cardigan Bay. And it was a target was at low level, below cloud. I could see it on radar, but I fired the missile, having met all the parameters, and got a direct hit. And we had a very successful missile practice camp. That I will add was very much due to a lot of hard work on the case of the engineers, because there was so much preparatory work to do on the engineering side, and so little time to do. They worked day and night to meet the requirement, and they did. We met the requirement. That again helped us become operational. So and then with all the training that was going on, we were a busy unit. But on the 31st of December 1986, we were declared to NATO, and we were ready for the declaration, and that was a great achievement. In particular, I'm going to say, because of a few other things that happened as well. Because it was a new aircraft and it was the future of the RAF at the time, I'll give you one example, the extracurricular activities. I'd come back from, I'd been flying the aircraft for 2 months. In April 1985, my Air Officer Commanding, Air Vice Marshal Ken Hare, a very nice and excellent pilot, who was a New Zealander, he phoned me up and said to me, he said, "Rick, I've had an idea," because that was the 50th birthday of the Spitfire, in fact. And he said, "Wouldn't it be good if we sort of did a synchronized display, the old with the new, a Spitfire and a Tornado?" Well, by this stage I knew that the Tornado was an excellent aircraft to fly. It was easy to fly, it was lovely to fly, and it had all sorts of systems that made it just a pure delight. And I said, I didn't have any problem with it. I said, I'm all for it. Well, cut a long story short, we, with the Spitfire from the Battle of Britain Memorial flight, flown by Squadron Leader Paul Day, known as the Major, hugely experienced Spitfire pilot. He was a Spitfire pilot, and actually I was the Tornado pilot. At that stage, there were only 2 pilots qualified on the Tornado, myself and the other pilot, ex-Lightning pilot. I would have normally done that because I was the squadron commander. But the other pilot, cycling back from the bar on a Friday night, fell off his bike and had a bit of concussion. And for a while he was on the ground, and so there was only one pilot for a while, me. So that's why I did it. And I loved it, absolutely loved displaying the Tornado with the Spitfire. The synchronized display we did went down exceptionally well. And it was just a pure delight. We got much acclaim during that year. The way we used to do it basically was we were in close formation, and then we were synchronized at different ends of a pipeline, as you could say. And the Spitfire, because he was restricted on his speed, would call out where he was, and I could see, if I couldn't see him, I knew exactly where he was. But it would give me the key to see whether I was in the right place, because I had the ability to make the aircraft go fast or much slower. So I could adjust the speed. So he did the RT calls, I adjusted the speed, and it really worked really well. We just did a number of displays during the year. At the end of the year, it was decided that it was only going to be for 1 year. I think actually the Air Force Board at the time were mainly sort of had flown aircraft like the Lightning and the Phantom, which couldn't fly as slow as the Tornado. But I didn't say earlier on, the Tornado being a swing wing aircraft, we could fly with the wings forward at a 25-degree angle of sweep, and various angles of sweep, all the way back to 67 degrees swept. So when we were supersonic, going high speed, we'd have the wings right back, and when we were in combat or an approach to land, we would probably most of the time have the wings forward. And we also have other manoeuvre devices that helped us with the wings forward. So flying the Tornado, you could fly it at a much lower speed than you could the Lightning or the Phantom. And it was very comfortable. We used to fly with the Spitfire we were in close formation. We used to be at 175 knots, and it was absolutely no problem. It was very comfortable indeed. But I think at the end of the year, it was RAF Lucas we displayed at, and I think the Air Force Board were there. And I think they couldn't quite understand how the Tornado could fly at the speeds it was flying at, because they knew the Lightning and the Phantom. So they decided that it wasn't going to be done anymore to the extent it was. It was done on an individual basis in the future, but as far as I was concerned, we did the very first one. That's one thing that's happened. What else happened? 1986, again, because we were a new squadron, we were told that we were going to be doing the Queen's Birthday Flight Past, which happens in June every year, the same day as the Trooping the Colour. At that stage, because most of our aircraft were delivered in the last 6 months before we got declared, but at that stage we only had 10 aircraft delivered, and we had to get 9 aircraft over the Palace. We did. We actually had all 10 aircraft serviceable on the day of the flypast. We actually got all 10 airborne, and we needed 10 airborne because one of the aircraft had a hydraulic problem, and we had to replace them in the formation. But that was quite an achievement in my view, to get 9 out of 10 aircraft that we had over the Palace. But of course, to most people, they wouldn't be aware of just how few aircraft we had. But we did it. That also it was something you don't get wrong. So it requires quite a lot of training, and I led that, and that was again a significant little extra that we had to fit in during our training, and but it was another great achievement as far as I was concerned. And then we had another exercise we got involved in, an exercise Safe Syria, which was taking place in Oman in, I think it was October 1986, not too long before we were going to be declared. And in fact, while we were in Cyprus. I came back to the UK with a few pilots, and we did a bit of practicing in the UK, fairly long sorties, day into night, what have you, because we were going to go on a long sortie, because part of the aim of this particular exercise was to prove the global reach of fighters from the UK. And we did. We took off from Coningsby with 4 aircraft, and 11 o'clock at night, and we flew non-stop to Oman. We obviously flew with tankers, as we always did, because we didn't have the fuel to get there without refueling, quite frankly, and we were going to be refueling probably 6 or 7 times in the process. But it was interesting. It was a very interesting experience. One, because 6 hours, the first 6 hours were all at night. 2, when we got over the Mediterranean, there were lots of storms in the Mediterranean at that time, which made it even more challenging, flying around the periphery of these storms. And remember, we were a formation of tankers and fighters, and in that sort of environment, you might be amused, but the tanker aircraft was always known as Mother, and the fighters were always known as Chicks. So we go down there, and anyway, came out of there, on we went, and the Commander-in-Chief, again, Sir Peter Harding, he said to me, "Rick, the VIPs will be expecting you to be there at 9:30 in the morning. You be there." We were there. And so that was another great achievement. That was the longest trip I've ever done. 10.5 hours, sitting in the ejection seat. By the time you get out of that aircraft, your backside's a little bit sore. We had plenty to occupy us as we were going down, apart from the refueling and the weather and everything else that you do all the time. But we could play games sort of between front and back on our TV screens. And we'd obviously sort of speak to each other, and there were other things we could get up to. It was that itself was another, in my view, great achievement. We had a good exercise down there, and then we came back to the UK. Actually, from there, we went back to Cyprus, and then I led aircraft into Jordan because the Jordan was thinking of buying the Tornado F2 at that time. So we went and flew some of the Jordanian pilots in the aircraft. Met King Hussein. King Hussein came out and spent a whole day with us. He listened to the brief. We had lunch with him. Listened to the debrief. That was a great experience. And flying into Jordan with his position was interesting in itself. So that was another very successful deployment. Back to the UK we came, and then the final one, which actually happened, as I recall, I think that happened actually after we got declared operational. But I mentioned those things because they were all additional challenges that added to the big challenge that we had to meet to get the squadron declared operational, which we did. The additional challenge that I was going to tell you about was because the government decided that they wanted to send a bunch of Tornadoes, F3s, by this time it was F3s we were flying, on a sales tour of the Middle East. And that came down to my squadron again, and I led the deployment to the Middle East. We went to places like the United Arab Emirates, we went to Bahrain, we went to Qatar, and where else did we go? We didn't go into Saudi, but I'll talk about Saudi in just a moment. We went to 3 or 4 countries anyway, but that was quite, and in fact that wasn't paid for by the Royal Air Force, that was paid for by the government. So that was one thing, but that was another thing that was, again, it was a challenge, preparing for it, going and doing everything we were asked to do. But again, like actually everything that we did in that tour that I had, we didn't fail once. We achieved absolutely everything that was asked of us. And that's why it is such a memorable experience in my life for several things. One, because I got the job that I wanted. Two, because it was a huge challenge, and it was. Three, because we met that challenge. We didn't sort of shy away from any of the additional challenges that came our way. Just saw them as another. We were very much a can-do squadron, to be quite frank, and I like to think I'm a can-do person all the time anyway, but we did it. And I'm very proud to this day of the achievements that we achieved during my time in command of that squadron. Also, the aircrew, particularly, sort of having the ability to choose who I wanted on the squadron, meant that I could get those that I thought were not just the best, but they were the ones who'd fit into the squadron the best, who were the hardest working, and I just knew that they would be good chaps, and they didn't let me down at all. They were first class. I think that's probably about it. I could go on talking. I didn't talk very much about the aircraft at the start, apart from saying that it was a Mach 2 aircraft. It's worth saying that actually, at low level, the aircraft was the fastest of the lot. The Lightning, as I recall, we were restricted to 650 knots. The Phantom, 750 knots. The Tornado, we were restricted to 800 knots. And believe me, the Tornado, it could go much faster than 800 knots. I've got no doubt about that. It was like a bullet. It was the engines themselves, again, because it was the fighter version had been produced out of as a follow-on to the ground attack version, where the engines again had been sort of really designed for the low-level environment, and we had the same engines. So the engines were absolutely superb. So we say below 5,000 feet, but they had the same problem as the Phantom in the medium levels. They ran out of puff, and then at high level, when we got up to high level, and we go supersonic, and we fly up to Mach 2, we go up to great heights, just like the Phantom and the Lightning in particular did before. We use the boom and zoom technique, but once the Tornado got into the supersonic environment, again, it was like a racing car. It was a real greyhound, you could say. It was superb. So it was superb at low level. The engines were very good at in the supersonic environment, but really tended to run out of puff in the medium level. Another thing about the Tornado, the wing sweep was a really useful commodity to have in the aircraft. We had to manually sweep the wings. We were going to get an auto wing sweep capability, which didn't come in because it required extra testing, and it was just getting too expensive. And to be quite frank, in my view, we didn't need the auto wing sweep. If you were flying around with the wings in the wrong position, you'd tend to get a feeling through your pants, and you knew that the wings needed to be moved, and you could just move them. So there was no great problem there. And there was another system on the aircraft which I quite liked actually, and it was called SPILS, Spin Prevention and Incidence Limiting System. We didn't, rather like the Lightning and the Phantom and the Tornado, we didn't spin these aircraft because we didn't want to lose the aircraft, and they did have spinning characteristics that could cause problems, so we didn't spin. Any spin training was done on other aircraft. But with the spill system, it meant effectively that we had carefree handling because you were being protected. So you couldn't get yourself into a position where you would flick the aircraft unless you had the spills in the wrong position. There was lots to do with the Tornado. The Tornado was an absolute delight to fly. Anyway, suffice to say, I finished my tour there, having started it in really the beginning of 1984. I finished it in June 1987, I think it was. It wasn't the end of my flying on the Tornado, because a few years later I became a station commander, and then after that I went off to Washington as an air attaché in the embassy there, thinking that my flying was over, but it wasn't, because I got promoted to Air Commodore and came back as the RAF's Inspector of Flight Safety. which at that high rank was from the flying perspective, was the most fantastic job, because I basically sort of spent my life. I had a big staff, which my deputy looked after the office most of the time, whilst I was out meeting the people all over the Air Force and flying. And part of my remit was to stay current on an operational aircraft, which, funny old thing, was the Tornado F3. And I stayed current on that. So I had a close association with the Tornado, because after I'd introduced it, when I went back to the Ministry of Defence, I became the wing commander that was running the Tornado office in the Ministry of Defence. Then I got promoted to group captain and became deputy director of Air Defence in the same department. So I had a close association with the Tornado for 10 years plus, and enjoyed that association greatly. And it's another aircraft I've got over 1,000 hours on. Anyway, that is just talking about how I introduced the Tornado into RAF service. Great challenge, great success, a great memory. Thank you.